Welcome back to this new inspirational video. Today I wanted to go over another important point shared by Emmet Fox. He would say, you are a mental being. Mankind is a mental being. And to know this is the first step on the road to freedom and prosperity. For as long as you believe yourself to be primarily physical, a superior kind of animal, you will remain in bondage. In bondage, that is to say, to your own habits of thought. For there is no other bondage. Again, a very fascinating point and a very important one to discover for ourselves. In 2008, when I first started taking metaphysical teaching serious, in my case, this whole point about the mind was so overwhelming at first. Not because it was too crazy to me, it was more a matter of I'm not surrounded by anyone growing up that even talked about this or even seemed to know about it. Everybody's just so focused on the physical side of life alone that they seem to not be aware as much, if at all, throughout their entire existence of the power of their minds, the power of thought, the power of imagination, the role emotions and feelings play in the manifestation of whatsoever we desire. So we go through life and we have dreams and goals but don't realize that they come from within and are expressed outwardly instead of waiting or hoping that somehow outwardly in the physical world we get to a place where we can finally live our dreams. That is how most people live. They let everything depend on the physical side of life alone. They don't realize the role their own thoughts play. So if you go over Emmet's quote, that you are a mental being, and to know this is the first step on the road to freedom and prosperity. For as long as you believe yourself to be primarily physical, a superior kind of animal, you will remain in bondage. In other words, if you don't realize that you can think whatsoever you want to think and truly understand the power behind that, you'll never be able to really outgrow anything. But once you start to grasp this, as I did in 2008, once it started to dawn upon me that I first have to think about what I want to realize, I have to become aware of it inside of myself, first and foremost, that I can then start to realize it and work towards its manifestation. A huge change occurred in my world, in my whole mental being. And that is exactly the kind of change you want to become aware of for yourself, that no matter where you are, you can think whatsoever you want to think. And then you start to realize, well, have I been thinking in terms of limitation? Have I been thinking in a way that kept me in bondage? And most people are. In fact, even I am at times. We all are always to a certain extent, because that's just what happens as a human being as we're going through time-space reality. But the more we become aware of this bondage, this spiritual bondage of ours, the more we can decide to step away from it by simply changing the way we think about things. So then the question becomes, how are you thinking about your life? In what way are you thinking about your dreams? Is it a constructive way of thinking, or is it a destructive way of thinking? Is it one of endless possibilities, or is it a way of thinking that seems to limit you severely? Really take this serious, because if you do, you'll start to discover so much more potential that was always there all along inside of you that you may have missed because you simply weren't aware of the role your thoughts played in anything, in the quality of your life, in any of the realizations of any goals. This is the most greatest awakening an individual can experience, and therefore what Emmet said is one of the most beautiful descriptions, again, that you can ever find about your own mind. You know, we don't want to be in bondage to our own habits of thought, for there is no other bondage. Most people are in the habit of thinking of themselves as a limited person, as someone that will have to struggle a lot. We have a dream and instantly we start to think it's going to be difficult to realize this dream. Why? Because to us, from this point of view, it seems like it's going to be such a huge dream. It's probably going to take so much time and effort, perhaps so much money. Perhaps we need so much people to help us. And you see this cycle, you see this pattern as it leads further and further into all sorts of limitations that are keeping you in bondage to your current circumstances. So I think a better way of going about this in order to break free from the bondage is to simply be honest with ourselves. What is it that I want to realize? and become aware of it, and then just start thinking about it without all the contradictions and negative things that might hold you back. Because that is really the issue that people face. If they don't understand that they can make a choice in that situation, they will never be able to outgrow where they are. So in 2008, exactly like that, my life changed. I will admit it didn't change instantly around where I manifested great things right away, but I started to at least dare to think about achieving great things in my own way. Things that I thought were impossible, and as I kept thinking about them, at first I was very uncomfortable about even thinking about these things, about earning more money, about being successful, about achieving things that I knew I had never done before and none of my friends or family have ever done it, but yet I desired to achieve them. You have to become familiar and comfortable with this whole attitude of thinking what you want to think in spite of what circumstances are telling you. This is a very huge obstacle we'll all have to face sooner or later. So if you've been experiencing this, where you have been thinking about achieving something great, but then other times you feel like you're not entirely in harmony with that dream, well, don't feel too shocked about it, because it really is a huge change in consciousness that you're actually, well, set in motion for yourself. You're no longer allowing the physical world to do your thinking for you. You are allowing your soul to do your thinking for you. And as you can imagine, that is absolutely huge, because the soul is one with God, and therefore it doesn't consider limitations or worries or issues of any kind. It simply zooms in on what is to be done, on what you want to realize in this case, and that's the only pattern from which it thinks, from which it operates. If you can just do this one thing, understand that you have the ability to think whatsoever you want to think, experiment with it. You come across limitations inside your mind, start to think differently. You don't change the goal around that you have. So if it's money, a career goal, etc., don't change the goal around, but change the way you think about it around. That's what I'm doing even currently with my own goals. Every time I might notice myself doubting a little bit, I just know I gotta change the way I think about this. I never change my goals around though, because I know the goals that I set are goals that I really want to realize and that are meaningful and have a purpose for me. They have a importance to me that I can't let go of, but I do have to let go of all the contradicting thoughts, like we always mention. This is part of setting yourself free from bondage, and what form of bondage it is. If you are stuck with limiting ideas and you don't understand your own mind and the power of your mind, that you can just simply think what you want to think regardless of those doubts that at first seem to hold you back, well, you'll never be able to outgrow it. And sadly, that is the reality of this world, that most people are exactly in that spot. So if you keep practicing this, you'll become better at it and you'll start to manifest more and more of what you want. You'll actually get proof that this works. Eventually, it should reach a point where it's like with me, that I know any goal that I want to realize, I first have to think about it inside my mind. What is the goal? What is the objective that is to be realized? And I don't instantly go to that root of doubts and worries, because that's how we're programmed. That's the habit, the habitual way of bondage that we're in. Instead, you start to enter the road of prosperity and freedom. You know, I can think about this dream, I can think about this objective. It already exists, spiritually speaking, inside of me. That means now I have to become in harmony with it so I can keep growing towards it. And to stay in harmony with something means to not doubt in it any longer, to not think in those limiting ways. Can you see what I'm getting at? Because the more this becomes clear to us individually in our lives, the easier it becomes to actually make stuff happen in a great way. And that's what we want. We want to achieve great things. Not because we necessarily have to, but because we just want to. We want to live a fulfilled life. And in order to do that, the way we think plays an enormous role in that process. We cannot think in limitations. We cannot do it. Well, you can do it, of course, but you shouldn't. We cannot afford doing it is a better way of putting it, because it's not going to lead us to a fulfilled life. Do you understand Emmet Fox's quote? Let me repeat it. You are a mental being. This means you have that ability to think, to imagine, to feel, You have all these invisible aspects to your existence that play the most important role in the realization of any goal you ever want to realize. That's you. You are a mental being. You're not just a physical human being. You have a superior, spiritual part to you that needs to be worked with consciously and deliberately. And to notice that you are a mental being is the first step on the road to freedom and prosperity. Why is that so? Because you realize that no matter what you're facing physically, you can simply mentally and spiritually embrace the new, the better, the greater that you want to realize physically speaking. It happens inside of you. And therefore you'll have freedom and prosperity no matter what the world dictates, because you can set yourself free. You can feel free. You learn to feel prosperous and free, even if there's physically no proof yet. But as you walk in such a mood, physically speaking, things will change around. That is the law. Now he went on to say, for as long as you believe yourself to be primarily physical, if you're only focused on the physical side of your life, if you're only looking at the strength you physically have instead of the strength you spiritually truly have, well, then you will remain in bondage, because you can't really do a lot. Physically speaking, we're not that strong. I know people can become very strong if they train themselves in that manner, but there's still a limitation to it. We have to become mentally strong. That's the trick. Because if you become mentally strong and thinking how you want to think, to focus on what you want to focus upon in spite of everything physically, well, then you're no longer in bondage. In that bondage, Emmet went on to say, that is your own habits of thought, for there is no other bondage. Ultimately, what you'll discover is that you were using the power of your mind all along, but sadly, most of us, when raised, are using it against ourselves, and we don't want to do that any longer. Let's set ourselves free by understanding this quotation, that you are a mental being. Now, if you're new to this channel, consider subscribing to receive inspirational videos on a regular basis. And with that being said, dear viewer, never forget that we are the dreamers.